Conduct of business. The first item is 10A, receive a report and provide direction regarding the results of the pilot program allowing on-leash dogs on park pathways in City Park and Grundy Park. Carrie?
So I think this may be the last time I'm going to get to say this. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. To Mayor Ruane.
I'll be here on the 28th.
But I don't have anything scheduled that evening.
Oh, okay.
We can put you on the agenda for something.
I was actually going to line all of you up, but that's fine. Thank you.
So on to the dog pilot program. As a result of community interest and concern, earlier this year, the City Council requested the Parks and Recreation Commission's input on how to address the frequent presence of both on and off-leash dogs in city parks. As distinguished from other San Mateo County cities who all allow on-leash dogs in some or all of their parks, San Bruno prohibits all animals except service animals, whether on or off-leash, from entering our parks. After receiving the Parks and Recreation Commission's input and considering the matter at 2 separate meetings, the City Council directed staff to implement a 6-month pilot program allowing on-leash dogs on pathways only in City Park and Grundy Park. No other city parks were included in the pilot program. The purpose of this report is to provide the City Council with the results and receive direction regarding the 6-month pilot program. As the chair of the Parks and Recreation Commission mentioned, from April 24th through October 23rd of this year, on-leash dogs were permitted on paved pathways in City Park and Grundy Park. Signs announcing the pilot program and waste bag kiosks were installed in these parks at the entrances and throughout the parks. The program was publicized on the city's website, Community Services Department e-newsletter, San Bruno Cable, Police Department social media sites, email blasts to recreation program patrons, and Nextdoor. Through this outreach, park visitors were invited to contact the Community Services Department with input on the pilot program or the Police Department regarding violations. Over the 6-month period, the Police Department completed approximately 121 passing checks and walkthroughs of City Park and Grundy Park, distributed approximately 500 information leaflets. They gave approximately 45 warnings to people for off-leash dog violations, with the majority of the warnings occurring in the first several weeks of the pilot program. Of these 45 warnings, 15 were issued at City Park and the remaining 30 at Grundy Park. During the pilot program, no citations were issued by the Police Department, and there were no calls for service related to dog bites, attacks, or similar safety incidents at either park. The Police Department did receive 2 complaint calls for off-leash dogs at Grundy Park. One of the guardians received a verbal warning, and the other was no longer in the park when the Police Department arrived. The Police Department has concluded that the pilot program did not create a public safety concern or significant public nuisance, and that responding to off-leash dog violations on a complaint basis would not create a significant additional burden on its resources. Similarly, the Parks Maintenance Division did not experience an increase in maintenance activity as a result of the pilot. And I'll leave to your imagination what maintenance activity might have meant. During the 6-month pilot program, the Community Services Department received community input on 9 occasions. On 4 occasions, the citizen expressed support for the pilot program. On 5 occasions, the citizen did not want dogs either on or off leash in any city park. Should the City Council wish to implement the pilot program by allowing on-leash dogs on pathways while still restricting dogs on turf areas, the pilot program could be expanded to include Commodore Park and Pacific Heights Park, both with pathways much like City Park and Grundy Park. Doing so would require a change to the rules governing dogs in city parks by amending the municipal code through the adoption of an ordinance. Signage announcing the park rules would be changed, and waste bag kiosks would be installed at these 2 additional parks. For a park the size of Commodore Park, we anticipate this cost would be approximately $2,500. This concludes my report, and I would be happy to answer your questions. I would like just to mention one clarifying point. I think Chair Palmer mentioned that The commission would be discussing the Commodore Park Dog Run at its combined November-December meeting, and I think that the chair and I, in a discussion earlier, decided maybe it would be better to wait till the January meeting to give us ample time to prepare the presentation. So in case anybody's watching, we wanted to make sure you were aware of that.
Any questions for Carrie? Irene? No. Do you want to speak? Just tell us your name and your street.
Okay. My name is Maeve. I live on Parkview Drive, which is right up the road from San Bruno City Park. I'm about 12 years old, but I'm going to be older in May. I just moved here, like Mom said, about a year ago with my mother and my 2 rescue dogs, which, you know, both adorable. And I've found that our bigger rescue dog needs a lot of exercise. And finding out that we had this city park right there was so awesome to hear, because we could just go down and walk them every single day. And yeah, thank you. So, yeah.
So I get you like the idea of walking dogs in City Park, right? Right, okay, good. Anyone else? No? Council? I think it's been very successful. I haven't heard any real complaints at all, and some positive things. It's good. My feeling is bring back the ordinance. Anyone else? Ken?
It was interesting because the pilot program actually started, I believe, within a week of Relay for Life. And so I was in the park for a while that weekend. And I joked around with a few of the dog walkers, and I go, feels pretty good to be legal now, doesn't it? And they felt, they just felt good. I mean, people walking their dogs, you know, with leashes, and no matter what size, they all just felt good. You know, it was a good time that they were having, and I just can't believe that. You know, can't imagine what they were doing previously to that. You know, since you know, we didn't have dogs running rampant throughout the park, but just a lot more activity once the pilot program started. So I think for the most part, and you know, silently paying attention to the discussions on next door, there are a majority of our residents are responsible, and they're taking the attitude that if you want to keep things the way they are with the dogs in the park on leashes, then they too need to at least speak out to those that are not complying, you know, with the guidelines. So I think there's a general attitude that this is good, this is a good thing, and that we'll do everything they can to make sure that everyone they see also complies. I do have a concern about maybe not doing it throughout the city, because when you mentioned not Grundy, but Commodore, you have such a large play area there, along with the dog run. So I'm not really sure how that's going to be with kids right there so prominently on the corner in that big play area, and then, you know, dogs all around, either walking through or around that area. So I leave that to the Park and Rec Commission to take that all into consideration. But and thank the Park and Rec Commission for finally, you know, making the suggestion and then implementing it. So thank you.
Anyone else? Irene?
Oh, thank you. I was just going to say the same thing you did, and would like the recommendation from the Park and Rec Commission about which parks. I know the city park is probably top on everyone's list, and that seems to be such a well-populated park that people don't take advantage and let their dogs loose too often, though I've seen them occasionally. I too have been listening to Next Door and reading about it, and people have been monitoring and self-educating. And I would hope that we would keep doing that ourselves, that if our staff members see people out there letting their dogs run around, that's not acceptable. So it's still my concern that dogs fight because they get territorial, and dogs poop everywhere, and dogs run after children who are running. So I would hope that people take to heart that those things happen and that they would keep their dogs on the leash.
Great. Marty?
So,
I'm a big proponent of having dogs in our parks on leashes and having responsible guardians, making sure that they're being cleaned up after and are behaving properly. I'm waiting to hear back on how we can expand this program to all the pathways. The one question I would have for staff, do we have the budget available to do the repaving for Commodore and for, there was one more, I'm sorry.
Pacific Heights.
Pacific Heights.
So we have, the council may recall that in the fiscal year 16-17 budget, in the capital improvement program budget, you appropriated $75,000. There's a small surplus or carryover into fiscal year 17-18, and there's a $50,000 appropriation in the current year's budget. We're putting the bid documents together literally as we're speaking, so that during the rainy season we can bid, and the Commodore Park will be the next park to have the pathways repaired and slurried. So we anticipate that we'll have about $60,000 to do that work. If it turns out that the bids allow us to pick up a small portion of Grundy, that will be the next park that we'll be seeking to address.
Through Chair.
Rico?
I would agree with the mayor to bring back, but I'd like to see it go to the commission. I'd like to see it. We have the pathway trial basis, which seems to have been successful. But as you have in your staff report, when you talk about Lomita Park on San Anselmo, it's extremely small. There is really no pathway. So is that best for a small area to have kids running in this grass area and the playground equipment, and then have dogs as well? So I think we need to have a balance, as we have tried to do here, and it seems that people have been good stewards of trying to do the right thing and having this trial period be successful. But I'd like to see it go back to the Park and Recreation Commission, define each park, whether it is appropriate or not, and then bring back to council for further review and action.
Okay. I agree. You have direction? Okay, thank you.
Through the chair,
Irene?
I'd like to suggest that, and maybe to the Park and Rec Commission, that we look at putting on public announcements on cable, and maybe doing even some little movie type things about how do you take care of your dog when you're out there. So, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I may interrupt.
Yes.
I just wanted
Mark.
to raise a timing issue, which has to do with the referral back to the Park and Recreation Commission, but then also the timing of bringing back an ordinance for introduction to all of you. So if an ordinance were to be brought back, we could bring it back on the 28th, which is your next regular meeting, but then it couldn't be adopted until January, and then wouldn't go into effect until February. So I guess the question I have for the council is, does the council wish to see an ordinance before the Park and Rec Commission acts and provides direction on which parks? And then if not, is the council interested in extending the pilot program until such time as an ordinance is brought back?
I think I would be in favor of extending the existing pilot program until an ordinance is brought back for the remainder of the parks.
I agree with the mayor.
Okay.
I agree
perhaps-
as well.
Very good. Perhaps somebody could just make a motion for the record to do that, so we'll have it on
Okay,
record.
Mr. Vice Mayor?
So moved, what the man said.
Second.
So motion and second on the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Great. And thank you, Maeve.